Hi, everyone. Welcome. It's Angela Love Zarenka from Lactation Education Resources. So happy to have you with us today. I have the great pleasure of introducing Nikisha Killings and Nikki Hunter Greenaway, who will introduce our special guest. Nikisha?
That's me. Hi there. Welcome to the show again. Thank you so much, everyone who has joined us. I am Nikisha Killings. I am co-founder of Nikki and Nikki Lactation Career Consultants, Director of Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging for Lactation Education Resources. Shout out to LER for making this possible. And I'm private practice IBCLC, but mostly these days spending my time teaching on equity in birthing and breastfeeding. And I'm joined now by the other Nikki.
Hey y'all, I'm Nikki Hunter Greenaway. I'm a family nurse practitioner and an IBCLC in New Orleans, Louisiana. I am also a homeschooler mama for right now. That needs to be mentioned, all the work I'm doing. I am the other half of Nikki and Nikki, and we're here with our special guest, Savannah. Savannah is, I'll let you introduce yourself. I'll give my little introduction. Savannah is my sister friend, an anthropologist, a mama, a wife, and a lactation specialist, and the baker of the best vegan chocolate chip cookies you will ever have in your life. It is Savannah. So you can introduce yourself, sis.
Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me here. It's so great to be in this space. I would add that I am also one half of the Nikki and Nikki Live team client. I was also a lactation client of Nikki Greenaway's, or Nurse Nikki, as we call her in New Orleans. And so that was a huge part of my journey as a parent, and also into the work that I've been doing more recently. As an anthropologist, I work on Black people in the Americas. My first project, we looked at anti-Blackness in schooling in California. And then as I became a parent in New Orleans, where I was living at the time, I realized that anti-Blackness is quite apparent in all factors of life, in case we weren't already aware, but particularly through the birthing process and the parenting process. And so I conceived, birthed and parented in a queer family in New Orleans, Louisiana, before the Defense of Marriage Act passed. So we had all kinds of fun things happening in terms of being able to conceive, being able to have our marriage recognized. Hi, sweetheart. Talking about you and how you got here. I'm speaking of homeschooling. Do you want to say hi? I know that's rough. That's rough. Can we deal with that later, please? But it's so good we have a nurse here, right here. Nurse, do you have a suture kit?
Wait, which one's Nikki?
Both of them.
Both.
We knew this is bound to happen. It was bound to happen.
Yeah.
Older.
2020, so exciting. The whole piece of like bringing together a family from the partnership part. We had to do a second parent adoption in order to secure the custody rights of my partner, because our marriage was not recognized by the state. You know, there's a lot of factors going on, and we know already how much Louisiana likes to separate children from their parents. We know about that at the border, and we know about that on every block in America. But maybe that's not the topic for today.
We can go in so many directions here, right?
I know, so many directions.
So when I was going through the process of, we finally got the conception together, found what we thought was a great midwife situation, turned out to not be, spoiler alert. But finally the baby came, onto this plane, and the night and day difference between the kinds of lactation support I got in the hospital, and then when I got home and swore that my breasts were going to pop off of my chest and that I was dying. And I called Nikki and said, no, that's the letdown. I told you about this in our class, and I didn't realize it. And from there on, it really started an amazing journey for me with my nursing journey. But also, I think we were just talking about this, Nikki. Nikki was also a childbirth educator in a class that was interesting.
Yes. I was the childbirth educator.
I guess all I'd say, last piece I will say is that last year, I started work on a research project looking at Black people and breastfeeding in the South, really trying to think about it more from an anthropological perspective, in the sense of, I think from public health, we often, we're like, oh, here's a problem, let's fix it, right?
Mhm.
And there are problems. And I think there's real experts in fixing. I would just say I'm not an expert in fixing, first of all. And I think there's, it's been over 100 years since W.B. Du Bois said, what does it feel to be a problem? So I really want to know what it means to encounter Black people in general and Black women in particular, and their choices around feeding their children as not necessarily a problem, but a source of wisdom, and really see what is the wisdom that leads to this higher rate of bottle feeding, right? And what is it, what might that tell us about what needs to be healed or reconciled or dealt with, that is not about what you get in the bag when you're born, when your baby's born. So.
I love that. That really just harkens to what the topic is today, not necessarily directly, but I love that you're shifting the language from, why are they doing this thing wrong or this thing different, to what wisdom is, are they experiencing in this space to make these different decisions. That it shifts the whole, angle that you come at an issue with. I love, love, love that. Words matter. Words matter. That's why we're here today. So thank you for bringing that full circle for us. So I think there's a backstory here. Nikki, you want to
Yeah,
tell the people how we bring ourselves here today with Savannah on this regarding
right.
words mattering?
Right. So I think I was pregnant. We were pregnant at the same time. Our babies are the same age.
Hey, Nikki, were you pregnant?
Yes. I was very pregnant. I was sick and all that jazz. But anyway, I taught their childbirth education class, and I taught it with another person. I've taught it with a doula, and the class, it was a interesting mix of folks and the other families that were there. But I think what I learned most from the class was the review that Savannah gave us of the class, and we sent out a review after the class to talk about how was this class and what things that we can improve. And I will say, usually folks give, like 1 2 sentences. That was great. Oh, could you make this in color or something like that? Savannah gave us a 2-page review about the language that we used and how we used a lot of mom and dad, um, and breastfeeding mom, and all those, and all the words that we use that were just in this lane right here. It wasn't very inclusive at all, and I took from that, and it was a tear because I'm like, I had a class where I made someone not feel welcome, or they didn't feel like they were part of the class. It wasn't very inclusive. So I really kind of had to dive into my own practice and say, okay, what is up here? What is in your images? What is in your website? What is in the pamphlets that you're hanging out and the classes that you're teaching? Scrap it all. Let's change it. We got to get it together. And so that's been a journey for me. And I would like to think that I'm improving a lot more. Because the other day I was saying something, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm a gestational parent. Somebody's like, wait, what? What did you say? And I even had to correct myself. Savannah saw one of my presentations. I'm like, and she said, I heard you say gestational parent. And I was like, yes, I did that. So I appreciate that, but I know that I have many more. And just in the people around me, like training my nurses and my virtual assistant who answers the phone, things like that, asking about your pronouns. That's something that we put in our intake form. That's very, very important. So asking what the partner wants to be called. Do you want to be called father? What is your preferred name, or do you just want to be called Jay? That's important. So Savannah started me on that journey. I hate that it started so late, but I'm there
Thank you,
now, and
Savannah.
she's been coming along with me.
I bet our audience can relate to that, though, right? All of us are on a journey. Somewhere we're different places on it, but we're all trying to make sure that we get this, that we do a better job at making sure everyone that we encounter feels included. So thank you, Savannah, for setting off that chain of events in the way that Nikki does her work.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think it's important to note that it's not, it was a great childhood class, right? And I think for many of us, we are used to getting what we need from a space, regardless of whether that space was designed with us in mind, right?
Mhm.
And so I think that it's important that it's not like, oh, these people will never use these resources unless we say chest feeding or unless we have like a super gay looking couple on the front cover, right? To me, it's more about signaling how much of ourselves we can show up with. And is it going to be the kind of thing where I'm just coming, I'm getting what I need and I'm leaving? Or am I entering in a genuine partnership, right? So I think that, you know, obviously we learned a lot in that class. And I felt like and particularly your intentions to lift and elevate and liberate community were really uh, right there, right? And it was just like about like, oh, it's a technical fix, actually, like thinking about the language, and it wasn't like a political or a spiritual, because that is a different practice. And people need to actually, there's one thing like, oh, I need to change these words. That's the easiest part because you've done all the rest of the work, right? That's just a search in a document. I think the rest of this other work, which is, do you see these people as parents? Do you see this as a body that's meant to be feeding this child or not? Like that deeper work. We're in this conversation because I don't know you. I don't know, I mean, Nikki, but I feel like you're already, you know, we're just at the technical piece to address other kinds of work that needs to be done. Because you can say gestational parent all day, and it sounds like BITCH coming out of your mouth. Right? Your man, auntie, nurse, right? But it's really said as an epithet. And so I just want to lift up that it's not about the language, it's really about respecting and honoring, right? The wonder that it is to care for a child.
Yes.
Listen, I'm taking copious notes already. Like I think we should be tweeting. Yes. Angela said there's so many sound bites we should be tweeting. I agree. You know, I consider myself to be pretty solid on this, right? To feel like I'm already here. I just need to make a couple of different adjustments. But as you're speaking, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, that resonates. That resonates. Let me make that note. Because this is going to drive the way I approach my practice differently still, even though I thought I knew a few things, right? So thank you for the wisdom that you have shared already. We skipped an important part. We like to check in. See how we're doing. How's everybody doing today?
We just jumped.
Yeah, we just jumped in. We're going to go back too, because there's so much to discuss. But I want to make sure we check in and know how each of us is doing in audience. Please let us know how you were doing today. It's important. It's important, and we care. What life looks like from your eyes today. Nikki, you all right? You okay?
Yeah.
That's your check-in?
I'm good. Yeah. I like I told Phil, I'm in New Orleans, and we were like the epicenter next to New York of COVID, and now we got our lives together by our we call her TD, our mayor, and now we're at a spot, but I think as the rest of the country kind of their numbers start to go up, ours are coming up as well, because I mean, folks are coming here like, oh, y'all having a festival or something? No, we have no tourism, none whatsoever. And so so many people are coming to New Orleans because they just had plans to come to New Orleans and they bring in their COVID with them. And we didn't really want it. So our numbers are going up, and it's starting to affect our practice. Like some of our nurses were like, so can we not go back in the homes? I'm like, that's cool. Like I will be the one that goes into the homes, but we kind of practice is changing again. This is an evolving thing, right? So we'll have times where we'll be out in the community and times that we need to chill at home just for everyone's safety. So we're still on COVID watch over here, very much so.
Yeah, same. That's funny that you should say that about tourism. I saw a post, one of my dear colleague friends, Sally, who is from Hawaii, shared a post from Hawaii saying, listen, we know y'all love it here and it's beautiful and you want to get away from whatever, from COVID in your area. Please don't bring that here. Like there is history of folks coming from their nations to beautiful island nations, bringing sickness and wiping out entire populations. Like, let's not do that. Let's not do that thing here. Hawaii will be fine if y'all wait and see it next year, whatever. So I got that. But it kind of resonated with me a little bit deeper because I understood the history that they were referring to. And I felt like, man, that I have actually heard folks say this is a great time to hop a plane to wherever for vacation.
It's not though. It's not.
Yeah. let's not. So I'm in Florida still, y'all. I'm still in Florida,
Bless you.
and Florida man, Florida woman are here. all the posts you see, hashtag Florida man. Yeah, they're here and in full effect. They are doing all the things they've been doing. And so it is not safe. It is not safe. And so we stay inside a lot. And we see the next wave coming because we, as a state, the governor opened everything back at 100%. Like there's no limited inside, nothing, everything's open. And so there is not in actuality or in practice at least. So there's, normal eating within restaurants, no masks are required inside buildings, and all sorts of happenings have resumed. So we will see a second, third, fourth, 12th. I don't know what wave it's going to be, but it's going to come, and it's going to come probably on the heels of every holiday that's coming up, every big one. After some trick or treating, after some Thanksgiving, after some, we'll continue to see the waves happening, unfortunately, with the flu season. So I'm very, very concerned about my city, my county, my neighbors, and that's how I'm doing right now.
Oh, Savannah,
Yeah.
how are you doing?
Well, out here in the Republic of California,
Oh,
California.
everyone secede. I feel like y'all are gonna secede.
Listen, you know what happened the last time somebody tried to secede? It wasn't exactly
It
the
didn't go
best
well.
effort. And so let's just be clear that the South is everything south of the Canadian border. And if you talk to folks in Canada, they're like, nope. The South is everything south of the Arctic Circle because they're doing it to us up here too. So it looks different out here, but at least the coronavirus stuff is more together, in part because the pissing match between the governor and the president. But if that ends up with additional COVID precautions, if that's where your white on white crime takes you, that's fine with me. And so we have, I don't know why y'all let me on this podcast.
Hey.
And so, like,
We're in it now.
Gavin Newsom said, actually, before any vaccine is allowed to be distributed in California, we're going to run our own scientific review on top of what the CDC does, but in the FDA, because we're not doing that. And so, all the schools, the public schools are all closed. I'm work from, my university system. The university systems are closed. Basically, no one's in person. I mean, there's.
I can't even fathom.
Inside, there's no inside. You can go inside the grocery store. There's still lines at the grocery store. No mask. Everybody has a mask. People, and we have a huge homelessness problem, which is to say we have a huge housing access problem because there's plenty of homes. There's plenty of homes. But we still have community members living on the streets. People will get out of their tent side encampments mask on, like masks on in the encampments. Like it is a universal masking people have picked up on what a concern this is. And so there's still definitely pockets of COVID happening, but we're way low, or maybe like have like the 5th or 6th lowest density in terms of cases per 100,000.
Really, Northern California was so ahead of the nation in locking down and refusing folks in and out and shutting cities down. Like always been, I think, kind of ahead of us, and are staying that way. Clearly.
Yeah. So people clearly, we don't go in. All the groceries get delivered. We go out to nature. So we go on a hike, go on a bike ride, go right, and go to the beach. Meaning go into the water, not like to hang out. We're out here on the water. But basically, that's how much. My child hasn't been under a roof that's not mine since March 16th.
Yeah.
And so,
That's amazing. That's amazing.
That is interesting.
Yeah, Angela, how are our guests doing? How's the audience doing? Anybody letting us know?
They're doing well. They're a little quiet right now. I think they're blown away by the wisdom that's being brought here.
We'll take it.
Some gratitude for the beautiful words, respecting and honoring the care for a child. So thank you for this, Savannah. That's wonderful.
It was. I wonder if we can start, Nikki and Savannah, at the beginning. We want to assume that every listener is kind of up here, right? So can we start at the beginning with what does LGBTQIA2S plus What does all of that mean? Anybody want to take a stab? I can do it, but I feel like I want to share the floor.
Nikki, you're the patient educator. Let's know.
Hey. Now, yes. Hold on. Let me write it out because I get my letters confused.
I'll say it out to you. L,
Lesbian.
G, B, sorry, B,
Oh, bisexual.
G,
Gay.
T,
Transgender.
Q,
Queer.
I,
Intersex.
A,
Asexual.
2S,
Two-spirited.
plus.
Everybody
else. Everybody. Did we get them all?
Did we skip the Q?
We said Q?
Queer. I said queer.
Okay.
Yeah, we got the Q in.
But
All
I
right,
know
so
some
that
have another, meaning. So some people say A is asexual, and then activist or advocate, and things like that. And I was like, I don't know who put that in there. But
The ally put it in there.
The ally.
Yeah.
Oh, the ally. Oh, okay.
Yeah. I think Q at one point was questioning, but that also felt like it wasn't from the community, or maybe I don't know. It's kind of an open term, like the plus is now. Yeah.
Some people also say the LGBTQQ.
There you go. Double Q. There you go.
So it's almost.
So that's the community we're talking about supporting today. Everybody that fits under that, everybody who identifies as one of those letters or the plus, and feels like that they are a member of this community. We want to make sure that we are providing appropriate, respectful care that's honoring the folks that we encounter. And that can start with, some of the, I'm sorry, someone wants to know what 2S is. Let's pause there for a second.
Two-spirited.
Yes.
Go ahead, Savannah.
So two-spirit, there's two things. One thing I would say is, so just to give, if they mean like, okay, I heard what you said, but I don't know what it means. So two-spirit comes from, it's associated with the indigenous communities. I think it's actually originally a Dine, which is the actual name of the Navajo is the Dine. So I think it's a Dine concept, but many indigenous folks from other traditions also have similar practices in which there are long-standing understandings of a person as having two spirits, meaning like what we might call masculine and feminine spirit in one person, right? So these are ways of understanding sexualities and genders that are not the hetero norm, that also aren't associated with like kind of white European ideas of homosexuality or transgender, because you'll see in a lot of communities, and that's one thing I want to say, like we are here to support these communities, but that alphabet soup represents communities, right? Not
Thank you for that.
Exactly. Yep.
Not only may not be the same, they also may be hostile towards one another, right?
Sure.
So, yeah, a lot of the most intense, it's not always even a coalition, right? And so two-spirit is like a specifically indigenous framework for indigenous people. It's not the kind of thing where you would like, oh, I realize I'm two-spirit. That would have come from culture.
Thank you. And thank you for correcting me. I used community as a singular word, and I struggled in preparation for today with how do we capture all of that instead of every time referencing LGBTQ. And so in my mind, I thought saying folks who are in this community, but that you're right, it's not appropriate either. So I may have to say all the letters every time.
That's some people use queer as a
catch-all, maybe.
As a umbrella, particularly in Black communities, same gender loving, especially across generations, multi-generational Black communities, same gender loving often has feels welcoming.
Thank you. I'm trying to stay with us, but also Angela's texting me vigorously as she communicates with the people. Angela, let me catch it. Last note. It says
we're talking about how to make sure everyone feels like they can hear that they need. And so I think part of that has to do with the information, literally like finding out what are the pronouns and what are the names that you all are using, right? So you can talk about Baba or Mama, this and that. I also feel like that doesn't mean that mom and dad aren't really important. Like some people may have fought for years and tried over and over again to become mom right? Or to become dad. So I think it's important that we're not just taking away those words, but recognizing that those go alongside other words. So we don't have to like de-gender everything, but more so think about kind of like all the options there can be, because I think that can be really harmful to somebody who may have worked a really long time to become a mom, right? Or to be called she, her, and they really want that. And so just kind of making sure we make with that. Does that make sense?
It does. I had a conversation with someone just a couple days ago about this, and at the end of we were just talking shop. At the end of the conversation, I said, "I want you to know that the language you use is really gendered, and I'd like to help you soften that a bit, go a little differently." And she was very open and very receptive. She said, "Should I just get rid of mother altogether?" And I said, No, because there are folks who absolutely identify as mother. If you could be a little more versatile, pepper in some alternatives, when possible, so that by the end of your talk or the end of your conversation, everybody listening feels like they were represented or heard, or they can identify with something you said, then you've done a great job, I think. I think that was an appropriate way to counsel. And so I think as folks are listening, they're like, what do I need to do with all my marketing materials? Do I take mother and father out of everything? You could, but there are folks, like Savannah said, who really strongly identify as mother and worked really hard to earn that term title. And so if you could have some alternatives throughout your materials, have various options, various representations, I think that's appropriate as well. What do y'all think?
Yeah, but understanding, like Savannah said, understanding why you're doing that. Don't do it because you think like, oh, this is the new wave, this is the fad or something. No, indeed. Like, understand why it's important to be inclusive and understand how it could be disrespectful and to leave someone out. You have a whole class and you're leaving out, 3 families over here. So understand, do the legwork, the foundation work, and get your body right. So it doesn't seem like it's a huge effort every time you do it. Like, oh, I may make a mistake. I made it. No, if you do it, if you do that foundation work, the mistakes will be less. Like you may do it once or something. You're like, oh, I'm sorry, that wasn't your pronoun. My bad. And keep it moving. Like it won't seem so much of like a huge something laborious as opposed to, or you change it when you come home. When you change and you acknowledge everyone's pronouns, you do it at your house, you
All
do
the
it in
time.
your job, all
Yes.
the time. It is now. That is you.
You're
All right.
changing the lexicon. You're changing the way you,
Exactly.
yeah, in
You don't
general.
say like, oh, at home you don't do it anymore. No, you do it
Yeah.
all the time because you change your foundation. But if you don't change your foundation, then it's going to come across as not genuine.
So there are specific questions from the audience as we're talking. I'm gonna just grab them as they go. Someone wants to know, what are we talking about peppering in exactly? If there's alternatives from other, what are some options that we're peppering in? What are y'all using?
Great idea. I mean, I think there's 2 pieces. I really feel like there's thinking about depending on what kind of information you're sharing. Some information is very specifically about the gestational parent, right?
Right.
The child might have 2 moms, right? So mom might be very not specific. Child might have 3 moms, child. And so I think if you're talking about the gestational parent, then say that. If you're talking about the person who's nursing, say that, because they might both be mom, right? And when you're telling a story, often we mix together kind of instructions, like the gestational parent does this, and they say, for example, in this instance, da 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 da. Let's say you give 3 examples. Maybe the first example has 2 moms in it. The second example has a very traditional mom and dad, right? And the third example, you have 2 people who use different kind of more gender neutral, gender expansive terms. In terms of masculine-ish terms. So for instance, my child's, the parent is her Baba, right? And Baba is both a term that's used by some kind of trans-masculine folks, and also is also the term for father in multiple African continental languages. We might hear West African folks use Baba, also some Arabic speakers use Baba, right? There's also a way of just bringing in a non-Western framework that's inclusive in a lot of ways. Same with mom, mama, umi also comes out of a kind of Muslim and Islamic Black traditions are hearing umi. People also might use the term amo, A-M-O, as a parental term, right? And so I think some people also use, especially when there's 2 people who are assigned female at birth, they might say, oh, it's Mama Nikki and Mama Savannah, right? As your 2 parents. Of course, in some places, everybody's Mama Nikki and Mama Savannah because you know them, so you kind of feel like what the context is, right?
Right.
So, or like Papa and Daddy, Mama and Mommy, right? Might be some ways that people create partnerships. The other thing I would say is there are also people who go by mom and dad, but maybe trans community members. So maybe they assigned a different gender at birth. And you may, as a person, be looking at them and be like, oh, something's happening here. I don't know what's happening. Usually what's happening with their gender is irrelevant to the care that you're giving.
True. True.
Right? So very specific.
And baby's gender as well. Yeah.
Right.
What's happening?
Mhm.
Yeah.
If you have a question about an ovary, let's get that question out.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the ovary. You don't need to talk about their gender or their parent. You need to talk about the parts. The parts are important. You know, the breast tissue, and some people talk about chest tissue, breast tissue, you know, the mammary glands, they're going to mammary. We can talk about that. A nipple is a nipple. And so I think that understanding where does the kind of separating out the cultural from the clinical. Because the clinical is something we don't want to pretend like we don't, you know, we don't be so standoffish that we're not caring for people's bodies as they are right now, right? Because he, him, they may go by dad, and they may also have some breast tissue that could be used to help feed a child, right? They may have a baby. The person carrying a baby may be the dad.
Absolutely, absolutely. So some of the things I've used throughout my references as well has been, I tend to use parents and families a lot because I'm counseling entire families. It's not just the nursing parent or the lactating parent, which are other ones I pepper in. So those are ones that, you know, interchangeably as well. I saw a great one yesterday when I was reading through some stuff. We're talking about maybe, you know, immediately after birth, if the, you know, gestational parent isn't available for skin to skin, another loving adult. Another, you know, and that's a fine term, you know what I mean? Who is another loving adult that can help, you know, gestational parent with this particular thing? Or, and so there's a lot of language around this that you can use. There's no one set term that everyone will identify with. Real quickly, Savannah, because you talked about transmasculine and chest, the word chest feeding, someone is asking, is the term chest feeding typically only appropriate for trans males?
I mean, this is also a Nurse Nikki question. I don't think so. I think I think honestly, we're at an awkward cultural juncture, right? Well, because we all have a chest.
Right.
All feeding is happening on chests. And so in some ways that could be a global term, right? That like, yes, all the feeding is happening on chests. I also want to honor that there was a lot of work put in over the past, I would say probably 3 generations to really lift up breastfeeding as a labor and a practice and celebrate breastfeeding, to celebrate the breast as both something that is incredibly powerful and sacred and every day that can be whipped out left and right. So I think it's important that we don't, you know, abandon that work, right? And how do we work with that and bring that into a tradition that allows that work to serve everyone, as opposed to saying everybody in the 80s was bad for saying breastfeeding, right? So I think I could imagine a world in which chest feeding became the norm. I don't think it is right now. And I do think that some people are going to be like, what are you talking about, chest feeding? And so a little bit of that might be some trans antagonism. It's one way to think of it, transphobia, but I don't buy that. People are not, I think the scared piece really, the idea of phobias, I think is a little bit too gentle. What you have is, I think of it as more trans antagonism, when people are hostile to the existence of this person. There's a little bit of that. There's a little bit being confused of like, wait, what do you mean? I thought it was breastfeeding. I think that's totally, I think it's okay to use the terminology with your client that they are using, right?
Follow their lead. That's a big thing. Just follow their lead.
Right. You are an educator to help them with their medical concerns, unless they are out here, you know, saying things that could potentially endanger their child or, you know, things like that. They just, you know, they're going to do what they're going to do, get the latch right, support them in feeling abundant.
Yeah. I would agree with that. I think following their leads, and that goes for pronouns. And, you know, I always say, just ask the person how they would like to be referred to, because that may be anything from a nickname to Baba to, you know, to they may share their pronouns, whatever they want to share in that moment. And then you respect and honor that moving forward. Same thing with how they refer to feeding a baby human milk. Okay, so someone in the audience wanted to make sure to say, just as Savannah said, we all have chests, we all have breast tissue as well. So either one of those would work. The way that I've gone with it is personally in practicing, y'all straighten me out if I'm wrong, is I think the connotation of breast has been for me feminine, and the connotation of chest for me has been masculine. And so I've seen the specific question about body feeding just came up. So I'm seeing a little bit of more, just a little more use of the term body feeding, which I think is intended to be a more general human feeding kind of umbrella term, which all are working for me. I use them interchangeably at this point. So y'all tell me if I'm off, but that's been my way. Yeah.
It works.
Yeah.
And like I said, I just follow the person's lead. Like I will, whatever, word you want me to use that makes you feel most comfortable in your space, that's the one that I will use for that. So it's not, for me in my practice, I feel like it's very individualized. Like while I do, and while we say we pepper in all these words, when I come into your space, it's going to be individual for you. It's not going to be the same way that I treated the family down the street and the same way I address them. So I think if we individualize our care, it will not seem like you're becoming a different person or a different business. Like you're not changing any of that, the clinical stuff. You're just individualizing your care.
Right.
Absolutely. Hey, that's my message. That's my mission. If you see me on social media, most of my posts are about just treating everyone you encounter as an individual and honoring their experience and what they are there to tell you. Listen to them, believe them, and move forward accordingly based on this individual and not any generalities that you may be prone to making. So that really is it. I love that. So there's a asking how they want to be referred to, asking folks what may I call you, what language do you want to use around this, all that's appropriate. Changing your materials, maybe taking a look at your care plans to see if it says mother and father. Okay, that's dated, right? If it's gendered in a way that's not necessary, think about that. Do you need to know baby's gender at this juncture to make sure baby's latching and getting fed well? Maybe not. Maybe unless you want to talk about whether circumcision may have impacted, their feeding for a bit. But where I got this learning on, hands-on was supporting my first family where both parents were, in the trans community, and baby, they were very intentional about, we do not address baby's gender whatsoever. This is baby's name. That's all you need to know. You're not changing the baby's diaper. You only, none of that's important. What's happening below the waist, we'll tell you, how many wet and soiled, and that's it. It is what it. And so, that was my first foray into this. And I to this day am so thankful that the family entrusted me. But also I made some stumbles along the way. I, bumped up and, maybe used, the wrong pronoun when referring to the gestational parent here and there, in their face, sitting in their living room, trying my very darndest. I still didn't get it right, and it's been some years now, and I still think back on ways that I could have done that differently. But I'm so very thankful that they allowed me the grace to get it wrong. And they say, we see you really trying. We appreciate that. We trust you, with our care and baby's care. And that's, I think, the goal here. The goal is to make sure that even if you don't quite know all the things, you try your best. And then folks will give you the grace to get the rest of the way to help you make those like Savannah was so kind to give Nikki that feedback. Nikki received it and changed her practice completely. And that's the goal here. Yeah, it's not easy, but it's what we have to do.
I think that's a great example too, what I was talking about cultural versus clinical in terms of circumcision. So you might have materials to say, oh, if baby was circumcised, then be sure to check with this, check on this and that, right? If baby's penis was circumcised, look underneath, give that instructions. That's different from saying, if you have a son, you may have chosen to circumcise. Or boys. No. If baby has a vulva, be sure to do this and that, right? So I think it's important. That's still important. The vulva is a vulva, right? Vulva's gonna vulva. Right. And so I think
we may just hit a new record for the number of times vulva has been said on this.
Don't let me bring out Vera.
That's Vera.
No, you keep Vera. You might have to now that you referenced Vera.
If y'all, I don't know if y'all are attuned to Nurse Nikki After Dark. Yeah, will educate.
And I would say even with that, I do videos on Wednesdays called Women's Health Wednesday. The first video I did, I was like, pause, I got to take out women because it's for people that own vaginas, right? And someone was like, but the alliteration, like, is Women's Health Wednesday. And I've been struggling with that this whole time. I'm like, do I take out women so I'm more inclusive? And when I asked a trans male, and they were like, no, you don't. Like, just get over it. Like, you're just going you're taking it too far, Nikki. And I'm like, okay, I'm sorry. So so that you can go to off on the deep end sometimes and then again, it just seems like you just scaring everybody. So don't be awkward.
Just because gyne means woman. I will change my no, everybody know you need to go to the gynecologist, get over yourself.
Right.
And I would also say some of the stuff that you're dealing with at Women's Health Wednesday, some is about vaginal ownership, and some of it is also wrapped into the way that women are socialized. And really, you're doing that deep work of unpacking shame, unpacking. You're really doing part of what you're doing is cultural work in those sessions, right? It's not, and so I think that's important to lift up too. That's a time to bring together the cultural and the clinical, and say, hey, you may have thought this about your vulva. You may have been told this and that, right? And that's all shaped by your gender. And that's for, what I'm saying? So it's okay to say, hey, this actually is for people who are or have been women, right? And that's another language that I got from a sister named Paris Hatcher at Black Feminist Future. And she runs these Black feminist visioning salons, really thinking about Black women and girlhood. And the way that she phrased things for that space is she's talked about people with the lived experience of having been a Black woman or girl, right? Which was that language meant to include folks who may have been assigned girl at birth and now identify as transmasculine or men or this, what have you, or people who were raised as boys, right? And who have come into their femininity, coming into their Black womanhood, later creating a space, but a space that is not for everybody. It is space for people who at any point in the life course have the lived experience of having been, and for her in that moment, a Black woman or girl. And so I think we can tailor and really think about, sometimes it's about really full inclusivity. And sometimes it's also about, this is specifically about people with this set of experiences, and how can I use my language that calls in everybody with that experience,
God. Yes. Yes.
Yes. Yes. All right. So we have a question. Well, real quickly, yes. Whoever asked, is human milk feeding appropriate? Yes. I actually love that one because it talks about the milk, right? And doesn't talk about who's
what it's about.
A human in the milk, and it doesn't alienate folks who are exclusively pumping, who are not feeding directly at their body. And so that's a favorite. The term nursing is still used quite widely. I've heard some pushback on that because it doesn't translate in some cultures very well. People think about the profession versus the act of feeding.
Traditional nursing, because all you get is nurse how to become a nurse, but
yeah. So that's kind of a becoming used less, I think. So okay, a couple questions. All right, so I am an LC doing a virtual breastfeeding group. I have started using the word birthing parent, but how do I begin using chest feeding versus breastfeeding to a group who are behind a screen with their cameras turned off? And how do I not refer to baby's sex is their question.
That's for you, Nikki.
Okay. I think using the word as birthing parent, I mean, I find that is the person that gave birth. I mean, whether C-section or vaginal, you're the person. Somebody gave birth. The baby came from somewhere. So I think that is appropriate. How to begin using chest feeding versus breastfeeding. You just use it. You can say whether you're chest feeding or you're breastfeeding. That's it. That's the way that I would do it. And I would also ask, why are your people's cameras off? Because with that, when turning the cameras on, you create that sense of community, and that the cameras being off automatically puts up to me like a brick wall. Like there's a lack of connection. So if you really want that group connection and breastfeeding support, then turning the cameras on so everyone can see each other, and then people at the bottom, and also ask people if they want, can you put your pronouns with your name? That's been a common thing on Zoom and all these platforms. Put your pronouns on there, include your pronouns, and in your letter or email to the families or in your advertising for it. And please include your pronouns so we, address everyone appropriately. Like you're trying to do the best you can to include everybody. So
I think that piece, speaking of which, let me go ahead and do that for myself right now. So I think somebody saying, yes, not everybody can use, I saw in the chat, everyone can turn on their cameras. And I deal with this a lot in my, I teach, I teach college classes, and there's a lot of stuff with the cameras, just in terms of a technical piece. It is kind of stressful for folks often to have camera on the whole time. So often I'll do a check-in, like a camera on check-in, where I literally just ask, today versus yesterday, like, are we feeling, is today better than yesterday, kind of the same, or today worse than yesterday? And just have like that 15 seconds of just seeing people kind of give an embodied response to how they're doing today, and then ask somebody whose day is better to check in and say why, and ask somebody who, if anybody's like, this day is worse, if they want to rant, with a sympathetic audience, just having that moment where they know they can turn it on and turn it back off, that can give them a little bit more times to come back in without you feeling like, you're scolding them, you're turning the camera on or something.
I feel like half of us have just decided to add that to our virtual support groups. Yeah, I'll be adding that. That is so helpful. It's so helpful. I lost it. What was the next question? Uh-oh, sorry.
Okay. I have, someone wanted to know about using
that's for you.
phrase.
I don't know what that was, but is Womb Wednesday too gendered? That's for you.
I didn't use Womb Wednesday because some women don't have, or folks don't have wombs. Like if you've had a hysterectomy or something like that, or you, whether it's voluntary or involuntary, things like that. So I felt like that was very gendered, and also leaving out a large sector of folks that, because I want to talk to your 80-year-old grandmother, and she may not have a womb, but this still applies because she out living her best life. So that's why I didn't use that.
Right. I would actually add on to that, is I feel like that I support the alliteration, but I think there's also, just in terms of surfacing the cultural stuff, there can be a little bit of talk about like wombs and uterus and menstruation that is actually can be experienced as kinds of trans antagonism, right? Because there are a lot of trans women, some of whom may have vulvas that they they've acquired through surgical means. Some of whom may not have vulvas, some may have things that look like penises that they call their vulva or imagine in that way, who may want part of that conversation, but the womb can really close off that door to folks who are either not interested in parenting, or who obviously have a hysterectomy or other kind of fertility stuff, and those who don't, who are not assigned female at birth. And so I think sometimes certain kinds of like really reproductive ways of referring to gender can feel like a form of hostility, even if it's meant in a celebratory way, right?
Right, exactly.
The shift from uterus to womb kind of has a lot of like cultural elements that can feel both exclusionary and also reductive if you're like, I'm a whole person. Like the fact that I have this organ that can do something is one part of me, but there's certain, particularly, certain kinds of religious and cultural traditions that really only valorize women for their wombs. And put yourself in with those traditions unless that's your intention. Just throwing that out.
Yeah, I think that's powerful. It goes to the next question that someone's asked. It says, I have non-binary clients that are so sensitive about all of these words. They hate it pregnant, and we're only sort of okay with gestate. So yes, some people are going to be very upset and not feel safe with the conversation happening. As a queer practitioner, this is helpful to hear. I settled on what is said, but in the moment, it's hard to hear from non-binary folks that they are being harmed. I get that. I get that. There isn't a one answer that's going to meet everybody's needs. Somebody has already said a lot of the terms that we talked about kind of excludes adoptive parents who aren't feeding, from their body per se. So there isn't a catch-all. There isn't a phrase that everybody feels comfortable with. So using some assortment, may be the key. Really, maybe.
I would say is that people, particularly with, and you said specifically non-binary, and so non-binary was not in that alphabet soup that we talked about at the beginning. It's a more newer term that often younger people are using that term. The experience of being a non-binary person, the experience of being a gender non-conforming person is very old. Many generations of people have used lots of language for that, but non-binary in particular, I think is a newer term. So that also could be a signal that people are going to come to you where they are in their process. So far, we've been talking about folks like the people, like the family you were talking about, Nikki, where they had 2 trans parents. They were very clear. They had done their work, they knew what they needed, and they were ready to work with you. People are going to gestate, people are going to have these experiences all along their own developmental cycle. So that person, if that person is having that level of reactivity, just like a sore, they're in a reactive place, right? They're in a reactive place, which doesn't mean that you're not responsible to care for them appropriately in that place, but recognize that some of that also has to do with wherever you are in your own journey with your gender and with your sexuality is going to shape what the level to which you're going to be able to enter into a partnership with a medical practitioner, and the level to which you're going to have to basically be defended against a very well-meaning medical practitioner, right? And that may not all be about you in your practice.
Ooh.
Thank you.
What Savannah said.
That's all I can keep saying. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Sorry, we were talking about adoptive parents.
Yes.
And so I think the other piece is like, yeah, everything ain't for everybody. The adoptive parents may not need the, IBCLC.
Right.
They may not be coming to you. And there are people who will be lactating without gestating.
Sure.
Right? It's supporting people who want to do I don't know all the terminology, but the secondary feeding, right? Around being able to offer human milk from their bodies to an adopted child, right? Also say, I know this isn't most people, the heart of most people's practice. There's also, when you think about the practice of breastfeeding, the practice of lactation, it is very gendered. And there's also trans women who have initiated lactation, not to feed a child, right? But it's part of their gender journey.
Yes.
It's part of their gender journey. And so just to recognize that, like, there's many ways that these practices can be part of bringing wellness and health to a client or a patient that aren't always in the narrative that we thought of it, right? So I just want to lift also that, in particular for trans feminine people and trans women, lactation can also offer not just like, oh, I can't do that, but actually an opportunity to experience their bodies in a different way and to participate in this very old tradition of lactating as a way of connecting with their own, women ancestors, blood and otherwise.
I appreciate that. Thank you for sharing that. I definitely had a call. Was reached out to by a trans woman who had experienced mastitis and was having some issues, but was so hesitant to reach out to an IBCLC because it wasn't sure, how she'd be received. And so I was, again, very thankful. But I say that to say this is an experience that it's not unique to me. You all may get that same call someday, and how you respond to it matters. Yeah. So I'm glad you raised that. Oh gosh, there's more. Okay. When discussing women's health, how can that be said in a more general sense? For example, women's and maternal health programming. I mean, it is what it is.
For you, Savannah. It is. I mean, that's my practice. My practice is blue maternal health. So who gave birth? That's who I'm gonna help. Like, that's what it is.
Maternal is obviously, is not less gendered than mother, right? Think of it that way, just mother. And so I think it depends on what the practice is. So childbirthing, right?
Reproductive health.
Reproductive health is a good one. Yeah.
And also, if you're doing women's health, say you're doing women's health. If you're doing women's health, you need to make sure that there's someone who is doing trans health. Is that something that's asked? It might be women in trans health, right? So, or if there's somewhere else that where those resources are, then say, hey, this is this part of our practice, and we partner with these folks who are specialized in this thing, right up the hallway or right down the street, right? So knowing where those resources are. And I think the other piece is folks who are in the alphabet soup or in the variety of queer communities have been dealing with these boundaries and these situations for far longer than, the amount of time it took you to think about changing your practice. And so they're going to come with a lot of expertise about how to get their needs met and about how to navigate these systems, right? And so they're already, so we already know how to manage up, right? We're experiencing managing up. And so I think it's thinking about how can you lessen the labor, the managerial labor that your clients are doing. The same stuff about access for families who their home language is a different language. And the kid is always doing it back and forth. That's very easy for us to think about, oh, there's a barrier here. How can I make this less of a barrier to care, right?
Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Listen, I could listen to you talk all day, Savannah. We're approaching our hour very, very quickly. I wonder, how can people find you and hear more about this wisdom that you've got to share?
Well, if you'd like more hot takes, I'm definitely on Twitter. On Twitter, it's a lot of spicy takes. Feel free to at Savannah Shange. My book is Progressive Dystopia, Abolitionist Anti-Blackness, and Schooling in San Francisco. More hot takes about the progressive movement and what it doesn't offer all of our communities. And otherwise, I'll be in UC Santa Cruz. See you there.
Nice. All right.
Thank you so much, sis.
Yes. Thank you both for coming. Thank you, Nikki, for using that experience way back when to not only shift your practice, but to bring it full circle here and help to impact the way that all of us are doing our work by having Savannah join us today. So we appreciate you both. And audience, thank you for being here, for posing wonderful questions, for staying engaged. We've got some wonderful feedback. Angela, you want to share that before we wrap up? I see you typing and you can just tell us.
Yeah, we've got a couple of really nice, sweet comments. The first one is, I'm constantly trying to expand my knowledge on how best to support all families. That includes language, especially language. I am by no means perfect and will make mistakes, but I promise to respect and honor all individuals. Another person says, so much love. This conversation is so valuable, and I am learning so much more in order to support a positive body feeding paradigm. So there's just a lot. And someone said the audio cut out a little bit. Can we get Savannah's information again?
If I can't type into the chat, can I? No, there's no.
I can take care of that. Go ahead.
It's just at Savannah Shange is my Twitter. And you can also, I'm mostly an anthropologist. And so if you like to read anthropological stuff, you can also see me at savannahshange.com. There's a couple links to stuff there. But in general, baby, oh my gosh, who is this, Nikki?
She's been so loud in the background. I was like, just let her come in. Just let her come in. She's very, you want to say hi?
Who is this?
Say hi. This is Selah.
Hey, Selah.
Hi. Okay. All right. Did I interrupt? Did you finish, Savannah, telling all your?
How does Selah interrupt? Selah's the whole book.
Hey, okay, we're happy now. Okay. Special appearance here, audience. Hey, thank you. I want to tell everyone we'll be back on November the 4th. Nikki and I.
After the election. Yes.
We'll be holding space the morning after the election. We'll be talking about policy and how it impacts the work that we do. We may or may not know what the policy will be looking like going into the next 4 years by that moment.
In Pennsylvania, we'll be counting till Friday, so you won't know.
But we'll talk about, we'll really just be here. So we appreciate you, coming, stopping in. If you need a little bit of a break from whatever's happening in your world in that moment, we'll be here to talk with you and hold space for you.
Yes.
Yes.
But thank y'all again for joining us today. Everyone stay safe and sanitized.
That's it. Bye.
Bye, y'all.